Hey cruise fans, and welcome back to another Cruise Travel Talk. It's September the 21st today, and we got some breaking news coming from Royal Caribbean International and Norwegian Cruise Lines. They've today made an announcement that they have submitted a report to the CDC that recommends over 74 different recommendations in order to return back to a healthy cruise operation. The news is that the group have submitted to the CDC today a report and the work of the Healthy Sail panel over the last 4 months, which recommends a series of initiatives that will enable the cruise lines, in their view, to get back to a healthy and safe way of cruising in 2020 and 2021. In today's video, we're going to be looking at those recommendations and try to understand the implications for those recommendations and whether we think it's going to be enough for the CDC to lift their no-sail ban in the US. So as you would have known, the Royal Caribbean Group and Norwegian Cruise Lines put together a Healthy Sail panel, and their work was undertaken for the last 4 or so months. The group was filled with lots of industry experts and medical and biosecurity experts, and they have been working in the background in advance of the CDC no-sail order deadline to make a set of recommendations which hopefully would allow cruising to begin with appropriate safety protocols put in place. So today's video is going to be about looking at those recommendations. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but what we're going to try and do is we're going to try and answer the general questions people would have in terms of what requirements would there be on them in order for them to undertake a cruise in the very near future. So these experts have recommended a number of health and safety measures in order to make the cruise industry safer as we move forward in this COVID-19 pandemic, and they've recommended over 74 initiatives or recommendations that cruise lines and other industries might put in place in order to be able to make their contribution to combating this coronavirus epidemic. So this panel has diverse and relevant experience across a number of disciplines. These disciplines include public health, infectious diseases, biosecurity, hospitality, and maritime operations. And the panel has outlined over 70 recommendations in 5 key areas. These 5 focus areas include testing, screening and exposure reduction, sanitisation and ventilation, response, contingency planning and execution, destination and excursion planning, and mitigating risks for crew members. And so after working together for months, the panel concluded that this was an important first step into ensuring that they can return to a safe cruising environment with the appropriate health and safety protocols in place. They recommend that other cruise lines and other industries take up their recommendations, and they sincerely hope that the CDC will give the green light to return back to a safe level of cruising with the appropriate healthy and safe protocols in place. So we await developments with bated breath from the CDC. As you know, the consultation period ended today on the 21st of September, and we hope that the CDC will make the appropriate announcement, having given a lot of thought to the excellent work that's been carried out by Royal Caribbean Group and Norwegian Cruise Lines Holdings. So, watch this space. And if you're getting some real value from this video, why not like and subscribe to our channel? It's through your subscription that this channel can grow. Of course, we have a very small number of subscribers at the moment, and we'd like to get at least 1,000 subscribers so this channel can grow, and ultimately we can continue to bring you this sort of cruise travel industry topics and content as we move forward. Okay, so some of the questions that would normally come up with these videos is, ultimately, am I going to be needed to be tested both prior to and during the cruise if we get back to sailing? I think the general answer to that is going to be yes. Ultimately, there are some recommendations made by the Healthy Sail panel to test in advance of the onboard of the respective cruise itinerary, and ultimately to be tested at the port just before you get on board. The reason for this is that they want to be able to see some medical evidence that you are free of the COVID-19 virus prior to arriving at the port, and secondly that they can have a backup test ultimately to double check that that wasn't a false negative and that you are actually free of the virus. So it will be the case that the crew also will have to go through a testing regime, and between 1 and 5 days before even departing for travel to the cruise ship, they will need to have had a COVID test, and when they arrive at the cruise ship they'll have to have another COVID test at that point. Once the results are returned, then ultimately there will be a period of time before the member of the crew actually does any work on any of the cruise ships. And so another question that cruisers may well have is, will I have to wear a mask if I'm on a cruise ship? The Healthy Sail panel has made the recommendation to fall in line with the CDC recommendations that the cruise line do actually ensure that in situations where there are lots of people in a relatively small area of space, then that they actually do wear a mask. In those areas where there's not a high population and ultimately it is possible to ensure social distancing and transferring of the virus through droplets of water in the atmosphere, then it's likely that the masks will not be required. But in any event, if you are in an area which has lots of people in it, then there will be measures put in place by the cruise line to ensure appropriate distancing, and ultimately some of the activities that are on board and some of the ways in which the cruise ships are actually structured will help prevent any transfer of any water droplets or potential virus in the air between the cruise customers. One of the other questions that's come up fairly regularly is, ultimately, is there going to be fewer guests actually on each cruise? And there are some recommendations in the report which say that there ought to be initially a lower number of guests in order to be able to ensure social distancing, in order to be able to ensure that the cruise ships are not entirely at maximum capacity, and ultimately to limit the opportunity where any virus or any form of virus can be transmitted. So expect to see a lower level of passengers on the cruise ship. Ultimately, that isn't necessarily a bad thing, but you may well find that the price of cruising ultimately will go up as a result of having less patronage on each cruise. And so another question that comes up regularly is there going to be a requirement for me to distance away from others on the cruise? And inevitably, I think that the answer to that is a yes. And there are some recommendations in the report which says that you need to ensure a minimum of six feet away from other people in a populated area. And the cruise lines, of course, will take steps to ensure that that is the case. Table separation, maybe some other form of physical separation between groups of people. So expect to see some social distancing activities on the cruise as and when it gets going. So another question that comes up is what happens if there's an outbreak on the cruise ship whilst we're on our cruise, and are there protocols in place to ensure that that is dealt with appropriately? Are there arrangements whereby people can be taken off board the ship? Are there arrangements where if there is a big outbreak of COVID on a cruise ship, will there be contingency plans to ensure that all of those not infected by the virus will be able to get off the ship as appropriate? And yes, indeed, there are recommendations in this report that essentially manage those situations like a crisis management situation, dependent on the size of the outbreak. Ultimately, if it's a relatively small outbreak, then clearly the cruise ship will have areas whereby those individuals could be isolated. If it's of a larger magnitude, there are going to be contingency plans for returning back to port and getting everybody off board in an appropriate and safe manner. Another question that comes up is what's going to happen to the self-service restaurants? Is there going to be a buffet style arrangement there? Are individual cruisers going to be able to help themselves to food in the buffets, or will there be some other arrangement? So there are some recommendations in the report which essentially say, for now, no buffets will be allowed. When you go into perhaps the Windjammer restaurant, for example, for Royal Caribbean, the food that will be available will be served by a member of the crew, a member of the restaurant team. So that's a good thing. Inevitably will stop any transfer from multi-use of the same utensils, and it will ensure that everyone can have a healthy and safe cruise, be free of any risk of catching the virus through utensils. And so, what if I have a pre-existing condition? Am I ultimately going to be allowed to cruise, or will I be prevented from cruising as a result of that? Well, some of the report's recommendations are that if individuals have pre-existing conditions, then they would need to go and see their health practitioner before embarking on a cruise. The cruise lines are not saying that they're going to differentiate you based on a pre-existing health condition or not, but it's down to the individual to see their health professional and ensure that they are safe to cruise, and that there is no reason why they shouldn't cruise with the current health condition that they have. So, as a result of all of this, hopefully all of those recommendations and those healthy and safe protocols in place will be sufficient for the CDC to allow cruising to return out of North America. And so we hope you like this video, and if you have, please consider liking and subscribing to our channel. We're a new Cruise Talk channel and a low number of current subscribers, so we would really appreciate you liking and subscribing to our channel, and leave us any comments that you would like to. Is this a sort of cruise videos format that you like? Is there something that you would like to add? Is there something that perhaps we're not answering in these videos? Do you have any questions relative to a specific topic on this video right now? Do you think that Royal Caribbean and Norwegian Cruise Lines will have the opportunity to return to sailing at any time in the near future? Do you think the CDC are going to release the cruise lines to sail out of US ports? Or do you think the CDC ultimately will extend the no-sail ban potentially through till 2021? So if you have any opinions on that, or if you have any questions, please leave some comments down in the section below this video. We'll be happy to respond to them, and thanks for listening, thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next Cruise Travel Talk. Bye bye.